Hello again. I've been very fond on the last few videos of saying here's something a bit different, so here's something that's the same. Like, it's what I've been doing, what I've seemed to have gotten famous for on YouTube for some bizarre reason. This is the GT1000 SY300 and it's a Where We Are Now in 2021 video, I suppose. Those two pedals are still the mainstay of my rig along with the Infinity Looper. I got to quite like the lightness of just having three pedals doing all the work, but it took a while to get it all set up in a rehearsal room, or a gig. Not that we've done any gigs lately, has anybody? Because the Looper and the SY300 were both in effects loops of the GT1000, of course, at the centre. So there's two leads going in there, there's all the power to both of them, and there's the extra box that plugs into the Looper, and it just take a long time, relatively speaking. It's a long time really, but seeing as though Mike has 20 odd pedals, I was taking longer than him. It felt a bit wrong, and I felt I was slowing things down a bit. So I decided, well, can I put them on a pedal board? It seemed a bit much just for two pedals, but I didn't think the GT1000 would go on the board. That seems a bit too much. So I had to think about things, and I did. And then as pedal boards do, they grow. As pedal boards always grow. But one of the things I've been doing some guitar stuff lately, as you may or may not have noticed. No reason if you hadn't. And I was using the RE20 delay reverb, which I've always loved, and became sort of a mainstay of my sound on violin. And I really missed it, particularly with the GT1000. Didn't come with a space echo to start with, though it does now. It came with the firmware version 2, I think. But it doesn't do some things that the RE20 does, although it had some features the RE20 didn't. I suppose in favour of the GT1000 space echo, it had ducking. Ducking's really handy, and I do love the ducking on that effect. But it didn't have the RE20 reverb, and maybe slightly more importantly, it didn't have the RE20 preamp. Now the RE20 preamp is on all the time, so it sort of gives you a slightly more analogy feel. Yes, I know it's a digital pedal. To the sound, it has this slightly annoying whoosh 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 noise as well, of course, which I'm sure I've mentioned before in one of the blogs. But it's a lovely sound. So, this is the that's the space echo in the there's not a lot. It's a very subtle difference, but it is there. One of the things that of course, it doesn't do as well as having the nice reverb, which I hadn't enough switched in there. It doesn't do the space echo effect when you hold the pedal down. Which you don't use a lot, but it's nice to have it there. It's actually quite nice to subtly just sort of bring it in. Just to bring it in and subtly, it adds a little bit of extra sort of strange colour. So that turned up. Of course I never got rid of it. What do you mean? Also on the board, that was almost a no-brainer, was the PS6 Harmonist. Now I've mentioned in previous videos about the GT1000 how bad the pitch shifters were. Now they are better in the firmware version 3, but they're not as good as the PS6. And to get them anywhere near even adequate, you have to put them into monophonic mode. So which is slightly annoying. I mean, particularly if you're a guitarist, that's very annoying, I'd imagine. But on a violin, you don't play a lot of polyphonic stuff, although I do double stops occasionally. So the PS6 is fully polyphonic, but it does also sound quite a lot better. So I'm doing a quick comparison here. So if I turn the delay off, so this is fifths below the note. Whereas if I use the pitch shifter on the GT1000, it's not even close, is it really? You'd realise actually how bad the GT1000 pitch shifters still are when you compare the two. Plus, they don't do polyphony, even at that rather dodgy quality. So you can see why I was keen to get the PS6 back in the fold. The other thing that came back is the MD2 Mega Distortion. Now I haven't used this, so I don't use it a lot to be honest, but I do use it particularly when I'm sessioning with Crippled Black Phoenix. They seem to like it, just seems very, very keen on that sound. And it will get used because it's a big, hefty noise. Probably blew the levels on the mixer, I should have checked. So that's a great big noise, particularly if I do start doing solo gigs again, which I'm hopefully might in the next year or so. That's a useful thing for making big sounds in big speakers. So that turned up again. So the pedal board now as it is now is that. Now the SY300, the Mega Distortion, the Harmonist are all on the first loop of the GT1000. The Infinity is still on the second loop of the GT1000, and the RE20 is after the output of the GT1000, so that's after everything. And that allows me to do other things as well, so it allows me to have a reverse delay in the GT1000 and then have the tape delay after that. Because one of the problems with the GT1000 master delay is it's the only delay that can have the bass echo or the tape delay or the bin echo rec and other sort of effects delays, as it were. And I often like a normal delay after that. So that allows me to do this as well. So that's been very flexible, and I've really enjoyed having that back. Because sometimes two delays are a good thing, and two good quality delays are even better. So the looper is carefully sighted here so that the aux output is useful, because I use that for recording. Very handy output. It's one of my favourite features of that looper. There are lots of really good features of the Infinity looper, and I think that's a real killer one that doesn't seem to be on a lot of loopers. And I do use it. So despite having extra pedals here, the GT1000 is still a pedal board. It's still my main effects unit, of course, because there's limited effect what I can do here. And despite all the updates of various different modes it comes with now, I still do use it as a pedal board, and the layout still has quite a lot of similarities with my old pedal board, just because that's where my foot memory, I suppose you call it maybe, my feet remember where these things are. So I'll just go through the effects on the GT1000. So on bottom left there you can see I've got two EQs there. So one's a high EQ, give me a high boost. And the one at the bottom is a low boost. Both useful depending on what I'm doing, sort of lead lines or backing bass lines and things, particularly with this 6-string violin, which I'll introduce in a moment. The bank up there, or number 2 as I call it, is my variable one. I plug all sorts of things into that. There's a compressor into that one, as you can see at the moment. One below it is usually a distortion, usually less horrific than the Mega Distortion. And the middle two are the pitch shifters. Now then, I've got the top one selecting the type of pitch shifter, and the bottom one switches it on and off. So if I click that on there, that switches it to octaver and harmonizer or pitch shifter. That switches it on or off. That's how that works. All of these vary depending on what I'm doing, but this is a lot of what I use. It's mainly how it is. So the second let here, there's the reverb on and off, and that's a slapback delay. So I want a quick delay. Useful for a quick delay. And these two, that's the tap tempo, and that's the master delay, which is usually the space echo. Sometimes I use the bin rack. I said the bang up one is used for variable things, the compressor. Oftentimes I use that to either switch in the SY300. If I'm using the SY300 in drone mode, that can allow me to switch lanes on the GT1000, so that I can play through when the SY300 is doing drones. I can be unaffected by the effects coming through the SY300. I'll show you that. So that sort of works. If I have it on here, so that's quite useful there. The other thing I use that for is to switch in sometimes the cab emulator for when I want this to emulate a more acoustic-y sound. I'll put up a card showing how I did that. I never know these things work. It's probably up there somewhere. Yeah, up there, showing you how you do that. To get that nice, slightly more acoustic sound in a way. It's not as good as the Sycorax, but it's near. The tap tempo there, which I mentioned, I'm not actually using, rather confusingly. I've got MIDI running from the SY300 into the GT1000, so the SY300 is the MIDI master clock, and I actually use the tap tempo on here because I only ever really need two variation switches on the SY300, so that's my tap tempo here. So all my delays and everything are all MIDI synced, which is nice. One word of warning: if you plug in the MIDI out of the SY300 into the MIDI out of the GT1000, it will make annoying clicking noises. You'll recognise this because it's the MIDI clock frequency, 24 clicks per beat, I think it is. But it's really annoying, and it took me a while to find last Tuesday, so be aware of that. Always plug these into the right socket. Good advice generally, I think. So let me introduce you to my new friend, which I've had this for a couple of years now. This is the Vector Prodigy Pro, which is a 6-string electric violin. It's got a Barbera pickup on it. It's a nice instrument. It's heavier. I've used it in videos before. It's slightly heavier than the other instruments I've got. It's quite chunky because it's solid body, but it does give it very good resistance to feedback. See also other video up there, which is also very helpful if you're playing really loud, particularly with the MD2. I mean, I'm playing on headphones now, so it doesn't make an effect, but if you're playing with big amplifiers, as we tend to when we're rehearsing, then that's a help. It doesn't have the geared pegs, which I often like. They're normal sort of violin peg, and it's tuned with the tunes here, but that's fine. And I have the bottom string tuned to an E rather than an F, which it would normally tuned as, because I work with a guitarist most of the time, and it's quite nice to have that low E. But you do have to remember to bow it quite hard, otherwise you get quite bad starts to the notes. So you do have to be quite clicky with the bow to really make it work well. So that's about it really. I mean, the power, it comes from there's a Strymon power supply in the back there, which has got 4 500 milliamp outputs. 2 of those driving the GT1000, because that takes an amp. One of which is driving the Infinity, because that needs 18 volts. Annoying. It's one of the annoying features of the Infinity, but I forgive it for its nice points. And the other one is a splitter running the SY300, and the other 2 smaller pedals, and that works really well. So when I want to go and plug in, I just have to plug those things into the GT1000, and I'm done. And I'll show you how that looks when it sells. I will disconnect everything now, and I'll show you how it looks. So that's what it looks like when I get it out of the case. So all of these are nice flying leads. All connected up together, and I just connect them all to the GT1000 and I'm off, because they're all driving from the same main socket as well, one main socket. So that's improved my setup design considerably and given me a bit more flexibility as well. There's a bit more weight in there, but it's not too bad, it's quite manageable really. I mean, the main extra weight is the RE20 and the pedalboard frame itself, although the pedalboard frame is a pedal train, so it's quite light. So that's the new rig setup. Hope that was interesting to you, and see you in the next one. Bye.